Hey everyone, it's Raghu, and I'm back with Mindrolling, and I'm with Andrew Harvey, somebody I've known about and have never met for a very, very long time. We have some parallels in our history. Welcome, Andrew, to the podcast.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lovely to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me,
No, absolutely. I think you're.
especially in the name of Ramdas. I have to say,
Uh,
Ramdas had a jewel-like explosive effect in my own life.
mm,
I met him and loved so many different wild and holy aspects of him, and very challenging, very provocative, wonderful being.
yeah.
So I'm very happy to speak to
Oh, great.
his group and to all the others who will hear this.
Yeah.
One of the great pioneers for us, someone who modeled one way of truly giving your life to serve God, with all the flaws and complexities that we all have.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, a lot of people, that trust that he engendered because of his honesty about his
Oh,
own
yes. Oh,
stuff,
God.
as he would
Yes.
call it, uh,
Yes.
that has extended beyond his life. It's pretty amazing, actually.
Well, it's a teaching, isn't it? It's the
Yeah,
teaching. It's the real Ramdas teaching is that you allow yourself to flay yourself when you know you need flaying because it's been ego, not soul.
yeah,
And you just got to go through it.
yeah,
Stop pretending. That's
yeah,
so cool.
yeah.
And
And
that
people
was his
get that.
brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people, and I mean people all the way, just, oh, somebody gave me Be Here Now. Oh, yeah, that happened,
Oh,
50 odd
yes.
years ago. It's still happening.
Yes. Oh,
And of
it's
course,
still happening.
a
It's
little
a
bit of.
permanent book. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the
Mm.
other thing is the psychedelic revolutions. I got the
Yes.
book and I took a couple of mushrooms and my whole world opened up before me. It's
Oh,
amazing that
gosh.
that is still going on now. It's really
Oh, I
amazing.
think it's not just going on. I think it's actually working at a tremendous depth to help us see the new possibilities. I think there are pioneers in that field as they are in quantum physics and in animal
Mm,
consciousness. It's part of this birthing force that's rising as well as this death force we are
yeah.
clearly experiencing, isn't
Yeah.
it?
We're going to talk about
Oh,
that
oh
later.
my.
But you know what? I mean, your life is quite rich, shall we say, very rich, and
I wish
so
it'd been a little less rich.
yeah, you're right. But it'd be great to hear some of the stories. Of course, we all love stories, and for people that's the way people really get to know somebody they don't know is through their stories, of course. So let's start with, I mean, and this was me finding out, just looking in a little. Um, Born in India. Okay. I know
Oh,
people who
yeah.
are born in India, maybe from Britain, Great Britain, or even from America, but not living there, Andrew, for what, 9 years? The first 9 years of your life? Is there any way you recall? Where was it, first of all? What part of India?
Well, let me just say that being born in India is for me the absolutely central and original and primordial and evolutionary event for me. That's it. Because to be born in India is to be born into sacred world and the sacred culture that is alive with divine beauty, pain, passion, magic, ferocity, truth. That's India. So I was born there, and I was born to British parents, one of whom had Indian blood. So I was myself an amalgam, a bridge, a weird, strange, unique combination. And working out what that combination means is the work of my life. It's not, everything is about that alchemy.
Mm, yeah.
So I'll tell you a story if you want a story.
Yeah, yeah. We want to. So
And
where
this
was
gives
it
you
though?
just
Tell me, Andrew, before you tell the story.
no
Where
anything.
where was it? What was the area or the city
It
that
was
you
in
were?
Delhi. I was born in the south in Coimbatore, and then
Mm,
my father was head of police in a place called Nagpur, and then I was in Delhi for 5 years until I was sent to boarding school at 6.5 years old, which is incredibly too young, and which caused a tremendous wound in my whole psyche because it was registered as total abandonment.
Mm.
And that is what has been at the center of my search too. If you have a very traumatic final wound, you have a very urgent search because you're searching for what will keep you alive.
Yeah.
And that was a blessing. It was now from this point of view, from this age, in the joy that I live, that I see it all as a very difficult blessing that, thank God, through grace, I somehow got through. And India is the source of that blessing.
Mm. Mm. Go ahead. What was the story you were going to tell about this time?
This is a really extraordinarily sweet story. It's a story about the love between me and my white Russian Marlene Dietrich look-alike godmother who lived upstairs in this flat surrounded by dancing Shivas, because she'd had an Austrian husband who had been a wonderful, crazy architect. And because she was a legend and a wild woman, and every afternoon I would run upstairs and jump into bed with her, and we would cuddle, and I would listen to her stories of Shanghai and the Philippines and the wild and wonderful and terrible men she had loved and this kind of thing. It was fabulous. But in the bed with us was another old woman who was a big, big, gorgeous, calm, old woman with white hair called Shanti. And Shanti and Bella were deep, deep soul sisters. And Shanti, it turned out, I discovered, was someone who was one of India's greatest healers and saints, because she had been someone whose reincarnation had been guaranteed by a group of 13 very skeptical British journalists.
No.
And she had healed personally hundreds of thousands of people. She had existed on the earth as a static sacrificial offering. She was like an incarnation to people. But she was this, I didn't know any of that. She was this old woman sitting between us who I adored because she smelt of jasmine and she cuddled me. But she did more than that, because what she did was she told me essential divine truths in a very simple way. One day she got up and she masked the lights in the room and everything became luminous. And she said, that is what things really look like when you see them with your open eyes, because everything is manifested from light. Everything comes from light. And I believed her because she was telling it to me. And later I found that I'd been cuddled and instructed in these ways by this woman who was revered as a saint.
Wow.
So that was India for me. That is the blessing I mean. It goes far beyond intellectual things, or it's the blessing of knowing sanctity intimately, which was a blessing I received when I understood nothing, just as a grace for my crazy life.
Wow.
That was India. How does that story speak to you?
It speaks to me like grace.
Yes.
Very big moment of grace that sets your life in motion, really. I mean, well, start with being brought up in that environment. I mean, India, I have spent a lot of time in India myself. And
it's so exotic and pungent and wild and multifaceted. It's such a baptism in everything, everywhere, all at once, isn't it? It's
beyond rationale, which is even
beyond
to this
any
day.
possible rationale.
Yeah.
Yes.
The freedom.
It's magic. You realize unconsciously that this is a magical illusion, which all the mystical traditions know, that at the fundamental level, this entire manifestation is a magical illusion, but terribly important what happens in the illusion and what you give yourself for, because that's the illusion is judging the illusion. It's a very complicated system,
Yeah,
so you better get wise about it. And
yeah,
that's
but
India too. India's a great wisdom teacher, great
big time. That's what I was trying
brutal
to
wisdom
say.
teacher.
When I go there still today, the beyond rationality, the chaos, there's
Chaos.
nothing that meets the way that you expect it because of where you come from
Nothing
in the
you can
West.
control.
Nothing
Nothing
meets.
you
So,
can control.
yeah,
Nothing you
exactly.
can
So
control.
that sets you free. I mean, so
That sets you free.
when I have an inclination to go there, that's, oh yeah, I can let
Yeah.
go. Just free.
It's such a release from fake, vain anxiety.
Hmm.
Because
Good way to
here
put it.
we exist in this illusory so-called Western civilization, which is so desperate to control absolutely every aspect of our breathing and semi-breathing lives that we have become addicted. And in India, the complete idiocy of that addiction is very clear because you cannot control anything. And
Anything.
it sets you free to enjoy and celebrate the shattering, amazing, chaotic life all around you as God itself. That's what
Yeah.
God is. God is this
Yeah.
vast alchemical cauldron that's appearing right now in front of me on this street.
You
Isn't
know,
it?
when I,
That's India, yes?
yeah, when I meet somebody and, we don't know each other, and I always want to know their story, and you've just started telling it, but I always do ask everybody, and I didn't with you because I kind of knew, what is the thing that set you in a direction to know there was a possibility of being, at the very least, more acquainted with who you truly are? So it's something like that. Okay,
Oh,
so they'll
yeah.
tell me story. It might relate to meeting a teacher or a psychedelic or something. But I've never, Andrew, heard anyone say, "I used to go upstairs and just hang out and get cuddled by a saint who who shared with me these truths, even as a little child, that became an extraordinary transmission, what I would call big grace." So that's so great, eh?
Thank you.
So
But
where from there,
that's India. That's India for
yeah,
me. That grace. Grace. India is always the source of grace. And
yeah,
sometimes it's terrible grace too.
yeah, yeah. No,
It's
grace
Kali.
is not
It's both.
necessarily, licking Haagen-Dazs ice cream every day. That is not grace.
No,
No.
no. It's the real fire of alchemist.
Yeah, right.
You're burning in
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
whether it's from bliss or from agony. You've got to go through the
Mm.
fires to be forged. Yeah.
So when you were taken out of this environment back to England, I'm supposing, uh, there must have been some, I have to imagine, withdrawal of some sort in
Oh
terms of
my
being
God.
placed
Yes.
back into this culture.
Well, withdrawal is a very polite way of saying amputation, massacre. I had to lose one whole world, one whole way of being, one whole magic, one whole enchantment, one whole rapture that I was living as a child in India, as a child at school in South India, with the glory of the mountains all around me. There was complete loss of a complete world. And the way I felt it the most is in physical affection, because Indians are incredibly affectionate people. In my childhood, I would sit on the laps of men and women and be cuddled and be held and be kissed. There was never any crazy suggestion of anything. There was just natural affection flowed like honey. And
Mm.
coming back, and then England, God Almighty, nothing is natural in England. No sentence is natural. No tone of voice is natural. Everything is constructed, and it was horrifying. I hated it. I rebelled deeply against it. I
Did you?
couldn't stand it. Yes,
Wow.
because I knew it was death. I knew it was the death of everything India had given me, and India had given me passion and wildness and adoration and hilarity and magic and tragedy and incredible, unreasonable peace in and under everything. The whole enchilada, which makes no sense at all, but transcends sense. How could I betray those things by becoming frozen in this vast institutional refrigerator?
Well, you needed to keep a stiff upper lip, did you not?
Oh, you know, I've been thinking a lot over the years about my English identity, just for all the kinds of reasons you can imagine. And I think one thing I really do love about what I inherited is the stoicism, you've just got to suck it up, buttercup, when the going gets rough. You can't complain. You just do the damn job. Because I come from, on my father's side, policemen and majors and military guys, solid Scottish, very, very Christian and very dedicated men of justice, really. And that is something so beautiful to me. I'm so grateful that they're the guys behind me, because they give me direction inside me. They give me, you've got to continue telling the truth even when people call you crazy. You've got to telling your truth, not their truth. You've got to stand up for what you truly believe and don't fear the consequences, otherwise you're not doing your duty. We've done our duty. You do your duty. It's very important for a male to have both the divine feminine in its fullness, but also the divine masculine in its fullness that gives the rigor, the icon of nobility, if you like, that you are invited and challenged to represent in your own ragged way.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I find that beautiful. So that's the side of England that I'm always in awe of and drawing from.
That's great.
In my own inner
positivity.
life, at this time in my life, I'm always talking to my father and asking him, what would he do? Because he was such a beautiful human being, so calm and so kind and so honoring and so respectful and so, in a completely humble way, such a deeply holy person.
Was he still alive, Andrew?
No, he died.
No, I know he's not alive now, but he was alive to see you blossom into the path.
Well, he did, actually. And what was so amazing is that my father really read my books. He used to go and read them and love them. He really tried as hard as he could to follow me, to track me. And he did so in an incredibly humble and an incredibly wise way, because he never criticized anything I did. He had trust in me. So when things went crazy, as they did go, he never said, I told you so. Or he helped me believe in myself by believing in me. And I think that's the most profound kind of love a father can give. It's a blessing of your fundamental existence.
Oh, you're a very fortunate man. My God.
Yes. In those ways, yes. Yeah, well, I think in every way, you've got to be, if you're 72 and having the most wonderful time of your whole life, you have done something despite yourself right. And that's also worth appreciating. You've somehow been able, through grace, to hold on to the line, and it's working. It's making you happier. It's making you more in love with life. It's making you funnier. It's making you kinder. It's making you more quiet.
Yeah. I also, my own father. So if we just compare a little bit, because what I'm hearing from you is extraordinary support and direction and love and non-judgmental mentality for the first 20 years of my life, that was not the case. A very somebody who came from the war and actually flew for the RAF. I mean, I'm Canadian, so he flew Canadian.
Wow.
And he flew bomber pilot. He was a bomber pilot. He flew these bombers, I mean, on these crazy missions that, I cannot believe he did it. But he got PTSD big time, but they had no words for
Those
that
guys
back
go
then.
through hell. They're strafed by hell. It's terrifying what happens.
Only two of them survived in his squadron.
Yeah.
So he had a lot of illusion, real Maya, as a result of this PTSD. So, and of course that played out into his family life and his children and so on. And I was particularly on the front lines of that. And then here's my grace story, Andrew, is...
Was he brutal?
He was not physically brutal, more mentally yelling, screaming, demeaning, blah, blah, that kind of thing.
That is just as brutal to a young boy. It's terrible. Yeah.
So the way that we talked about your big grace with having the saint that gave you what she gave you. I went to India with Ram Dass when he went back the second time, around the same time. And then a few months later, we met up and we were there with Neem Karoli Baba. And so I was writing to my father, and my brother was with me. I got him to come over, and I was writing to my father saying, wow, you can't believe this. This is, I mean, I don't even have the words. And even though I was like still, it was like a part of me couldn't blend even with the thought of being with him in any way. In any truth, that's probably the right word, in any true way, because there was all of that anger and fear and all that. But I was still writing him because I knew there was love there, right? And he suddenly wrote back after a year of writing him, hanging out with Maharaji, Neem Karoli Baba. He said, I'm going to come. I thought, holy shit, he's going to come?
That's so amazing.
Oh my God. And he ends up coming, and we meet, we meet and go through all of what he only came for like 2.5 weeks. And we took him, my brother and I, and my future wife.
Enough.
Yeah. Took him to the ashram in Vrindavan where Neem Karoli Baba was. And this is a famous story, which people who listen to this podcast, they all know this story, but just in basic terms, he asked me to give my father, Maharaji asked me to give my father the yogi medicine that Ram Dass gave him, acid. And when my father heard this, I went, what? Acid? He went, LSD? And then Maharaji said, take care of your father while he's in India. Take care of him, okay? And then, I mean, he blew his mind in other ways, knowing things that nobody could know, all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. And then we went, and I think you must have been in Benares while you were in India at some point. And I took my father there, and we went, and we were on a houseboat near the Manarkarnika, the burning ghats, the famous burning ghats. And I got some acid by chance. Somebody had some, and he actually took it. And there's a 50-odd-year-old
in Benares. That was a wise move
by the burning ghats, and he thought he wasn't afraid to die. And then
amazing.
He knew he was afraid to die. And
that is such a wonderful.
We went back and saw Neem Karoli Baba, and then he got it, he just got it in the moment after that. And then my whole family, this is my big grace, came together. And everyone in my family ended up coming to India to meet Neem Karoli Baba, except my mother, who came with me to meet Siddhima, who was very close to him, our Indian mother. So that was
the chicks gathered under the rugged the blanket of Karoli Baba, that blanket.
Exactly. All right. So next is you went back. So what propelled you to go back to India? You must have been after being a student or college. I'm not sure
Well,
what.
just before that, thank you for your story. I love that story because what I love most about it is Neem Karoli Baba's unbelievable freedom.
Yeah.
He knew exactly what would help the most, and it would be to give the old guy some LSD, and then the Grace arranged for him to go to Benares and have it in a place which would immeasurably expand him and make the expansion be real.
Yeah.
How amazing. That is such a glorious story. But it is a story that is open to us all. And that, I think, is at the core of what I'm trying to communicate in all I do and all I write, is that don't think these amazing things happen only to very few people. They are actually going on all the time. The trick is to try and be with them so that this experience can be a blissful, awestruck, deeply passionate experience that gives you strength and joy and purpose for every step of the unfolding of your life.
Exactly.
Don't you think? And it goes beyond religion. It goes into the core of really what Ramdas was doing, which was, I believe, the greatest gift of Ramdas was to give us the essence of a very strong side of Hinduism, the essence that could be translated into truth in the depths of modern life without any adornment. Great deal of sincere witness behind it. That was a very beautiful gift, a very holy gift. Yeah. And I think that what he gave was a tremendous inspiration for me and for so many others, because it really showed us that at the core of the work that we were challenged to do should always be this sense of an immeasurable expansion possible for the human experience. It never stops growing if only you truly give up trying to control it.
Yeah, that's a big if. Big if, Andrew.
I know, but that is the game, isn't it?
Yeah, it is the game. Yeah.
But fortunately, it's a game we lose.
Ultimately, that's the big win when you lose. It's sort of weird.
So why not lose it now?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's the great koan of life, isn't it? How to allow yourself to be truly intimate with what is and stop trying to do, in the deepest sense, anything. That doesn't mean giving up action. It means really plunging into what the Gita says, I think, when it says, the sage is the one who knows the action in non-action and the non-action in action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And what Ramdas experienced in Neem Karoli Baba, and what I have experienced in Ananda Mahima and then Bede Griffiths and in the Dalai Lama, is, I think, the force that unites action and non-action. And that is the force of presence, the force of sheer, naked, warm, tender, unique presence. That's where action and non-action meet, because that presence is itself the most holy of actions. When the 86-year-old Dalai Lama got out of a car in Ladakh last year, when I was in a little retreat up to taking my group into the Himalayas, he got out of the car in the early morning. He was in pain. He couldn't walk really. So these guys came and lifted him up. And then he just stood and he looked at us and he smiled and he blessed us and he loved us. And then he walked in. But what more extraordinary action could there possibly be than that irrigation of your whole being by the tender fire of compassion and love beyond imagining in a human being who's also clearly divine? just
I
as you are.
yeah. Yeah,
Yes.
I heard a great story, Andrew, about His Holiness
Please.
yesterday or today. I'm going to remember it. So he was giving a talk over several days, as he's
His
done.
Holiness.
Yeah, His
Mm.
Holiness,
Mm.
less these days because of his age and all.
Oh, God, even
And
he.
yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, and I'd been to so many over the years of his 3, 4, 5 day events. And, they go from extraordinary to I'm fending off people that are falling asleep on my shoulder. Okay. Because it
Yes,
is,
he's great at both. Yes.
yeah, it ranges in the boat. And so, anyhow,
But it's
at,
amazing,
at,
really, too, isn't it? Because he's giving the entire Tibetan transmission as well as the Western transmission. He's not
yeah,
failing the rigor of his
yeah,
tradition. He
exactly.
cannot do that. He is the Dalai Lama.
Yeah,
And that Dalai
exactly.
Lama means that all the quotations have to be perfect and the categories have
Man,
to be perfect. And it's a transmission of a way of organizing reality that is also
yeah,
very important.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
what I've found.
Yeah. So
Listening.
anyhow, there was a
Yes.
Q&A, and this person got up and said, "Your Holiness, is there some way that this enlightenment, however he put it, that was his meaning, can come, is a perfect question, right, from a Westerner, can come, within a short period of time, I mean, I'm
Yes.
getting on,
Give me the 7 easy
and you know
steps.
what
I
his
want to get there
reaction
right now.
was?
What?
He started crying. His Holiness the Dalai Lama, he started crying because of the missed opportunity of this being that was going astray in such a, oh God, wrong-headed way. And the compassion in him, it just blew up for this moment, for this being. Talk about, I mean, the Buddha of
Oh,
compassion. Yeah, no
yes.
doubt about it.
Oh,
No doubt about it. Wait, now I got to get you to tell us you're going back
isn't
to
that it?
India. I want to hear what happened because you go back there. That's kind of you were there for 9 years, then you went back home, probably through
Oh,
school,
a
and
lot
then
happened in that time, as you can imagine. But I went to Oxford and then I got a first, and then I sat for the All Souls examination, and I became this weird thing that is a fellow of All Souls College because it's like being suddenly catapulted by helicopter into the elite of the elite because it's in a beautiful, holy, wonderful designed college and you suddenly have a little money and you've got free rooms and you're given freedom to do whatever you want. So it was like, oh my God, what's happening now? And what was happening is that I was getting a very clear photograph of a civilization in total depraved decline because it was a completely improbable world. And I got to see people at their most naked, and they were often very powerful and very important people. And it was devastating to see cruel, naive, selfish, self absorbed, crazily greedy and ambitious they were. It was like being baptized in old, terrible, smelly blood. It was horrible. It was wonderful too, because it woke me up to that whole demonic passion for money and power that has so damaged our, it's in the process of potentially annihilating our civilization. So I woke up. I realized that I'd been Oscar Wilde's great comment about, just hope you don't get what you ask for. And I wanted this. I thought about how wonderful it would be. I have no money. I'd love to have some freedom. Why don't I try for this examination? Never thinking that I would get it. And then I got it. And then I thought, oh my God, this. I've been given to show how not to be shown how not to live, how not to. And that sent me back to India for a year. And I went to India for a year and I wandered India. And thank God, because at that time I came to Pondicherry, and in Pondicherry, I met a very dear, wonderful friend who laughed at me a lot, which was very important, and also was clearly seeing God nakedly and directly, and was a wonderful poet. And we became friends, and he slowly humbled me to start meditation. And when I started meditation, I was in Aurobindo's tomb, and the light came, and a week later, I was seeing the light emanating from everything. It was a very final experience, although just the very, very beginning of a real journey. But it was a flash that finished one world, one way of seeing or being. So then I had to decide, how the hell am I going to go?
Did you meet? Did you have darshan of mother, or was this after she
No, I
left?
never did, but I feel that in the years since she has died, I have had increasing darshan of the absolute amazement that she birthed. Because of Satram, because of the agenda, because my own inner research and my own work has been more and more attuned to what she is such a pioneer of, this birth of a new kind of human being, a divine human being, a human being that has been transfigured consciously here in the great cauldron of the sacred marriage. So no one has done a work so precise, so terrible, so beautiful, so absolutely fearless as the mother did in the core of her body. And to have that relationship available to us between her and Satram in all of its nobility, because he risked his life for the truth he only gave him because she only trusted him. It's an extraordinary, incredible blessing to know that she did the work she did.
Yeah.
And it's real. It's
I was
real
blessed before I met Neem Karoli Baba, because Ramdas told me I can't find him. When I first came to India, I ended up in Pondicherry. And I actually, at one point, a couple of months later, before I left there to go to the Himalaya, I actually had her darshan, which was my
she
first.
appeared on the balcony.
No.
Did she? Oh, she came down.
No. They took me up to her room in the back, where I don't know if it was Sat, I don't know who it was, but this very tall, beautiful man, Indian man with a large white beard. It was like, I thought, okay, I'm going to heaven now. I mean, it was like going into another plane of existence. And
she was in that plane,
he ushered me in and sat me down in front of her. And I had brought, for prasad, flowers was, as you probably know, was a big thing. Every flower had a related to
significance. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. But I didn't care about that. I wanted to give her something I liked, and I love bananas.
She's your mother.
Yeah, it's my mother. So I brought in, I gave her bananas. I'm from Montreal, so I mean, speaking a little French and saying, "Oh, he likes bananas," And then, even though I knew before going in that room that she had been very ill, she was probably in her 90-ish around there. She died in 92. She was 92, I think.
Yeah.
Right after Neem Karoli Baba, actually. So I knew I was going, somebody who had some form of Parkinson's or something like that. I don't remember what. But, and I had a fear of being with people, old people who were very ill. It was like... So he took me in the room and he sat me down. And I swear to God, I'll never forget this. It's like reading one of those books. He walked into the room and it was filled with light. And, I'm more Buddhist oriented in some ways. I like His Holiness says, let me have the experience myself. Well, I did in that moment, and had darshan, right? The presence of the Divine Mother. And, when I got to Neem Karoli Baba, at one point, he just said to me,
initiated into the presence, you could recognize
I got the goddess.
presence.
Yeah, exactly. And then he said, "Where were you before you came here?" And I was thinking, well, I had been actually at Swami Muktananda back then. I was actually there for a few days. And before I could say anything in English, he used to do this, "Mother, mother." And he repeated her name over and over. And I got, oh my God, how the universe works is just extraordinary. Anyhow, that's another way that we, that was.
But what a lovely way to celebrate the gift of India, too. It gives you the gift of the reality of the presence, not only in the creation, but in you, in your heart, mind, soul, and body. It is a revelation of incarnation, isn't it?
So did you meet, because you do, I think I thought I read that when you went back, you met many different saints, masters, teachers, and so on. Is that happened when you went back?
I did, but it was really much more that first time. It was an opening to what has become truly the focus of my life and focus of my work. It was an opening to evolutionary mysticism through Aurobindo. Because fundamentally, we've had these two transmissions from the core of the mystical traditions. First one says that we're in a world of complete illusion and our job is to get out of it and to be free of it in the limitless transcendence. The second one says that's just the beginning. That's refugee stuff. It's evasion. Because once that has been understood, then we enter again with that consciousness blazing into this, into the embodied mother, into incarnation. So then we really allow another kind of humanity, divinizing humanity, transfiguring humanity to be born in us as us. And that corresponded to something extremely buried in myself, I think. I realized, oh my God, this is the secret key. This is the truth of truths which we need to rediscover at this moment because we're going through a death process so extreme that its only possible spiritual meaning must be that it is that extreme because the birth that it's engendering is that amazing. So the more we know of it, the more we trust the guides into it, like Aurobindo, like the mother, like my great teacher, Father B. Griffiths, like the great evolutionary mystics, like the great Christian mystics who lived the transfiguration experience, like the Shaivites who celebrated the birth of the Golden One, the Shiva of the universe, in themselves, as themselves. They weren't making their stuff up. They were speaking of, in fact, the next possible level of our own evolution. Yeah.
Fast forward. We'll do a little fast forward.
That too was India's gift, right?
Yeah, right. The Tibetan Book of Living and Dying. I never, for some reason, I don't know why, but I first encountered you and know of you through Rumi and your connection there and books. But the Tibetan Book of Living and Dying, I only associated with Sogyam. I always thought, and to this day think, that this is such an important text for people to be able to follow along, because the Tibetan Book of the Dead can be very, very difficult for Westerners. I think that this translation of it, this interpretation in some ways of it, is just extraordinarily important. Okay, and so you were involved with that, and we now have. Oh, tell me how did you work with Sogyal Rinpoche on that?
First of all, it was an unbelievable honor to be invited to work at that depth with someone and a group of people who had been so steeped in the tradition of the great teachings of Tibet on this subject. It was a supreme honor. Secondly, it was completely wild because Sogyal was a very wild teacher, let's put it that way.
Yeah,
And
some of that's come out more recently.
Yes, unless it's true, unfortunately. But the great side of him, and there was a great side of him, as there is often in these very complex figures. The great side of him was that when he did focus, it was so electrifying. He had such a genius for synthesis because of his own extraordinary training. And I was very, very impressed by that. It was a transmission in itself of something of his own capacity to bridge the ancient culture and the modern culture. And he was a very powerful bridge in one way, in one part of himself, and very damaged in another, unfortunately. So it was a thrilling process because through it, I was able to meet these very great enlightened masters at the end of their lives, sitting in rooms in Nepal, talking about what happens in the death process and what you meet and how to go through it, as if they were talking about walking around a park, eating nachos.
Yeah.
They were absolutely, they're people like Khyentse Rinpoche, most of all. I was
going to say this. I swear to God. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche.
Nobody like him. I have absolutely
to me, that's like the 16th Karmapa, Neem Karoli Baba, that level of non-duality living in a body.
Oh, completely. Oh, and so majestic, so
very tall,
radiant, and so loving. You had this immense force of love around him, and the entire experience can be summed up for me in this tremendous moment that I had the grace to spend with him. And this is the beginning, really, of the whole writing. And he was giving us this initiation into Manjushri, into exactly the kind of wisdom that we would need to be able to do this work together. And at the end, I was presented to him and he looked at me and he just laughed. And it was this huge, sweet laugh. And he held my hand for about a minute and he just laughed. That was his, and that laugh has echoed through the whole of my disintegrating life. And that, thank God, that is because what I feel he gave me in that moment was shunyata. He gave me emptiness. It was the raw, that love. He had that power, not because he claimed it, but because he was living in the core of it. He'd spent 30 years in solitary meditation. And he was so humble and royal at the same time. Amazing, amazing grace just to know that such beings can exist and do and did exist. I don't think we're going to see very many more of them.
No? Well, that's a depressing thought, actually.
No,
but
that is
somewhat
you're
true.
right. Now, who the hell am I to say that? God can produce all sorts of wild rabbits out of damaged hats, right?
Yeah, and I guess this is a moment where we could use a couple of them, right?
And here, there are supremely gifted teachers on the world surface now, but it's a very, very difficult situation for authentic teaching. Because there is no spiritual world which is honestly confronting the level of the devastating crisis that confronts us. No one in the spiritual world is really saying what needs to be said to the human race, which is you are heading towards total extinction fast. Unless you address major crises, which cannot be addressed except by you changing structurally everything about the way you are now living.
Mm.
That's the real evolutionary message.
It's
And
the
it's coming through on every level, isn't it?
it's the changing. There's only one place that word can have any meaning in my mind, and that's the change inside each one of us.
Yes.
That transformation has to take place. I did an audio book earlier this year with a friend of mine, Duncan Trussell, another podcaster, the movie of me to the movie of we.
Exactly, because
And
what happens, isn't it? When you do the work to find out who you are, you inevitably find out who everybody else also is. And then you invite them to this party that suddenly has opened up for love.
Yeah, right.
And working together, right?
Yeah, I love Ram Dass's thing. He would say, we walk around and judge everything and everybody. Too fat,
Yes.
too thin. Oh, nice, not nice. He said, but when you go in the forest and you walk through the trees, you're not judging anything. Every tree has its own unique facets.
Yes.
That we are part of. And of course, in the forest, those roots are all, as we've learned, are so
all those
interconnected.
extraordinary interconnecting computer roots,
Right.
these fabulous interdependence manifestations. They are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah.
What we now know about the consciousness of creation through grace is absolutely extraordinary. It should change our every consciousness, should we?
Yeah. Oh, and we're running out of time, but I mean, we have so much. We could go on, Andrew, and do one a month or something. Maybe we'll do that one day.
It's been great. I've loved every moment of it, and I loved your stories. And I think I just want to catch. If you don't mind, I'd love to just respond to something you said. You said something which is, of course, absolutely true. That it begins with each one of us changing. But I think the situation is so extreme now that has to be absolutely wedded to a passionate commitment as a citizen to put wisdom into action urgently in the core of our political, social, sexual, economic lives, because we have to be agents of this new possibility. Otherwise, we're contributing to the annihilation. So there's a double.
Agreed, absolutely, 100%.
You know what I'm saying? It's a tremendous. Ram Dass did that all his life.
Yeah, I mean, for decades, and he really rode the wire.
Yes,
of inner social action and outer social action.
Did
and and you're not going to do anything being angry. That is not. That is just more polarization. But how do you get to the point where you actually are mindful of that, where you actually can transform that, which is a lot of what we did in that audiobook, is super, super important. So it's very tricky because we spiritually bypass every damn thing that we can put our hands on.
I think when I hear you say we can't be angry, I think I know what you're saying, and I know that it has an incredibly profound spiritual pedigree. But one of the great revelations of the Tantra, I think, is that there is a blessing in fury. There is a blessing in sacred outrage. And that blessing, if you can hold it in a spacious consciousness, blazes out as clarity, discernment, and absolute laying down of sacred boundaries. And I think that one of the things that we need to reclaim is the tremendous visceral holiness of our most fundamental original emotions, of which anger and outrage and fury at cruelty and narcissism and obsession with fame and peddling in obscene psychopathic lies for power, which goes on in every element of our contemporary culture, especially now, of course, obviously in the political element. That's essential too.
Yeah.
That's how prophetic new human is born in us by marriage, it seems to me.
I think this is where how I know it in myself. When an anger comes, the way that it many's a time is self-soothing. It's self-satisfaction.
Yeah,
It is
that's true
not
too.
empty of that thing which renders it useless. It is not empty of that. I mean,
No.
we saw Neem Karoli Baba once. Ramdas, it's crazy to tell the story at the end of this, but it's really relevant because Ramdas once saw Maharaji hauling off at a guy. Turned out he had been taking the potatoes and selling them outside the audience. Something really nuts. Who would do that?
India.
So he threw him out. I mean, Maharaji used really crude language. Get
He
the
knew
you
how
know
to,
what
right?
out
Yeah.
of here. And Ramdas saw this, and he saw him screaming, angry, and he ran down there and he said, You tell us not to stop being angry? What is this? And Maharaji said, Ramdas, you can be angry, just don't throw anyone out of your heart. And that was that lesson. Right.
You know, the other guide for me, but that's such a wonderful story. But there's a wonderful story about Ramakrishna coming to a field, seeing this rabbit, and the rabbit said, "Protect me from the snake." And Ramakrishna says, "Don't go anywhere near the snake." The next week he finds him close to the snake, dead. And to the spirit, he says, "Well, look, what did you think you learned from my story?" He said, "Well, I was to approach the snake in compassion, love." And he said, "But you missed one side of my story. I told you to hiss, but not bite."
Yeah.
So how do you learn how to hiss and not bite? How do you learn to claim the majesty of your divine identity and refuse to accept violation in the name of something sacred in the human experience? How do you learn how to do that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. That's what we're here for. That is what we're here for.
Absolutely. But that's a ferocious path. It's a beautiful path, but it has ferocity in it and on it. You suffer on that path, but you're forged in that suffering. Thank God, despite yourself.
Yeah. Oh boy, great to have you here, Andrew, and meet
Lovely
you.
to be here.
It's such the delight of podcasts. Okay, for me to be able to spend
me too.
this time.
My God, I so rarely get the chance to talk, just to talk as a person, because I love this. I love the heart to heart with someone so loving and wise with such beautiful stories. I hope people have enjoyed this sacred conversation that we've had.
And by the way, Andrew has the Institute of Social Activism, which will have sacred. Sacred. Well,
yes.
That's it
Sacred.
too. Sacred. Which we'll have a link to in the show notes. And as well, I think we would recommend. I mean, there's so many different books, and you'll see it when you go to the website. But Radical Passion, Love and Wisdom in Action is key in terms of what we try and do with forwarding Ram Dass's teachings into the future. Love and wisdom in action. So we're very in sync here, Andrew, I believe, and we'll give some links. And Andrew's got a really rich website.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So lovely to meet you. And so
same
lovely
here.
To be with you.
This is the Be Here Now Network. Go to BeHereNowNetwork.com and you'll have all of the links in the show notes. And we'll see you again next week. And thank you so much, Andrew.
Lovely to see you.